Ah yes, the good old classic Windows 10 that we've known since 2015. Hey guys, it's Julia here, and as you guys know, as of today, July 29th, 2025, Windows 10 is officially 10 years old. So, this is quite a big deal because I still remember when Windows 10 came out, and this is exactly what it looked like. And I'm sure you all remember Windows 10 build 10240, which was the RTM release of Windows 10, also known as version 1507, and you guys are seeing it now. And in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about the very first release of Windows 10. However, I'm also going to be talking about the most recent release of Windows 10, which is Windows 10 version 22H2, build 19045, and it's the current version of Windows 10, which it ends support in October of 2025, which to be specific is October 14th, 2025. And I believe 22H2 released sometime in 2022. I'll put up the date on screen as I don't remember as of recording right now. However, this video is going to be going into the differences between the oldest version of Windows 10 and the newest version of Windows 10. So we're going to sort this in 3 categories. The first category is going to be installation and setup. The second category is going to be apps, like all the pre-installed applications, going through them, seeing how they're different. And the third one is going to be the user interface. So basically how the OS looks and all that stuff. So anywho, without further ado, let's get into the first part of the video, which is the installation and setup. As you guys can see, we are currently booting an installer for Windows 10 build 10240, which is the RTM release of Windows 10. It dates 2015. And you guys will notice a difference once we get to the next screen, which is the product key screen, which it actually has a skip button instead of saying I don't have a product key like on newer builds of Windows 10. It also has Windows 10 Pro and Home as the edition selection. It was last updated 2015 for the license agreement, and pretty much the setup is the same. However, you'll see on the bar when you want to restart, and the bar on the bottom, it's a lighter green, which on newer versions of Windows 10, it's a much more vibrant green. And the getting ready screens are the same like during this phase, but as you guys will see here, we've got through OOB, but it reboots again because RTM is a bug where it likes to reboot after going through OOB the first time. So now I'm currently going through the OOB. You can see we got the get going fast, and it also asks for a product key in the beginning, which doesn't happen on newer versions. And the setup is a lot simpler on these older builds of Windows 10. As with Windows 10 version 1703, they added the Cortana setup, which that was the creator's update. You could see we have hi, we're getting things ready for you, and this won't take long, which are the famous phrases of build 10240, as each build of Windows 10 actually changed the text for what it says. So we got the taking care of a few things as well, and let's start. So here it is, Windows 10 build 10240 in all its glory. But obviously I ended up installing VMware Tools and booting it back up again, and you guys will see it'll be in its full resolution. It does boot a lot quicker on RTM compared to 19045. You'll see the famous password glitch where it has the password box even though there's no password. That was fixed in a later cumulative update for RTM, but this ISO doesn't have any cumulative updates, so obviously it's going to have that bug. And you guys will see OneDrive is already giving us pop-ups, which it did in 22H2 as well. So now we're starting the installation of Windows 10 build 19045, which is 22H2. And you guys will see there's no date in the corner in the setup, which is kind of interesting. But you guys will see once we get to that product key screen, it will indeed say, I don't have a product key, which we select that. And there's a lot more additions on the selection screen, which obviously we're going to do 10 Pro for consistency. Last updated June 2021 is kind of interesting for the license agreement. And then we're just going to begin the installation. You guys will see that the bar is much more vibrant, which I believe version 1703 changed it, if I recall correctly. But you guys will see the getting ready screen and all that is the same and has not changed whatsoever. So once we actually get into setup, it says just a moment, and then we get into this Cortana looking setup, which by the way, Cortana's not speaking because it's the Pro edition, so we don't need to worry about that, but it asks us for region, and then it tries to ask us for a keyboard layout, And then from there, it wants an internet connection, which I select I don't have internet, and to continue with limited setup. And then the username screen, and then the password screen, which I never do in here because it asks security questions. And then I uncheck all of the privacy settings because we don't need that spying. So anyways, then it asks about Cortana, so we hit no. Then it says, hi, we're getting everything ready for you. This might take several minutes. Which, by the way, Cortana actually is dead now, but when 22H2 first released, it was not. So that's why Cortana was still in there. And now it says, leave everything to us. And then soon we're going to get a different screen, which is going to say almost there, because they actually changed that in version 1803 from let's start to almost there. You guys will see that we have Microsoft Edge already popping up in our face, and then we get VMware Tools, which I'm not going to show all that. We boot it up, and here's our VM, which I had to time lapse this a bit because it took a lot longer to boot this compared to build 10240. So you guys will see we're finally at the desktop of Windows 10 build 19045. So now let's go on to the second part of the video, which is showing the apps that are built into both of these. So for the first built-in app, I decided to show Microsoft Edge because this massively changed between the first build of Windows 10 and the latest build of Windows 10, which this is the original Microsoft Edge, which was based off of HTML instead of Chromium like the new Microsoft Edge is. And honestly, I really liked the look of Microsoft Edge. I thought it looked pretty nice. It was pretty basic, but it wasn't like bloated like Edge nowadays. It was just nice and simple. However, I will say it was extremely buggy, so I didn't really use it, and I ended up switching to Google Chrome because I tried Edge and it just didn't work well. But you can see it had features like drawing on the screen and all kinds of stuff. It was pretty neat. And when Edge was actually in beta, it was called Project Spartan in the Windows 10 beta builds. And I wish they kept that name because it was pretty cool. But you could see when we get to the new Microsoft Edge, it looks way different compared to how Microsoft Edge actually looked before. And it's also now all bloated and stuff. Now, because I didn't have the VMs connected to the internet, it didn't have the latest version of Edge, which has Copilot and all that stuff. But yeah, the new Edge has like Copilot built in and all kinds of stuff. And in my honest opinion, I don't like the new Microsoft Edge. I think the old Edge was a lot better. I just wish it was more stable. If Microsoft just built a better HTML web browser, I think people would honestly use it and it would be awesome. But now I just see a lot of bugs. I hear about it taking too many resources. Also the fact that Microsoft tries to shove Edge down your throat, auto importing everything from your old browser to your new one was just extremely annoying, as it's happened to me actually. And the fact that they try to push it down your throat. But Edge was definitely a massive difference and one that everyone probably knows. So that's Microsoft Edge for you. For our next app, we have Cortana. As you guys can see, this is what it looked like in the interface. I had to obviously enable like a ton of settings just to allow it through, but even after enabling all those settings, unfortunately, it does require a Microsoft account to be signed in, which obviously I didn't have the internet connected, and even if I did, Cortana's been shut down. It's not going to work. And on the new version of Windows 10, it just asks us to sign in right off the bat. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show Cortana. However, that's that. So now I decided just to show some of the basic UWP apps. You can see the Get Started app is right there, and then I'll end up opening the calendar, and I just start going through a lot of these apps, which you'll see a common trend between them, which is they all have a similar looking interface. And you can see I'm playing with the virtual desktops there a little bit, which existed on the newest as well. But anywho, you can see I start opening like the weather, and some other apps are just starting to crash on me. Like the Xbox app here just doesn't even open at all. You can see the old Groove Music. I remember when that was a thing. And obviously the Microsoft Store doesn't load because there's no internet. And I just start going through all these apps, which the reason I didn't connect the internet during this is because I had a feeling a lot of these apps would break if they saw an internet connection. But here, the Money app was actually quite interesting. It had some content built in there, as you guys can see. However, one of the buttons would just crash the app entirely. I don't know why, but it just did. But anywho, you guys can see now we're in the News app, which looks very similar to the Money app, and some apps just looked very similar to each other. They had a very similar user interface, they had their own look, and here the Microsoft Solitaire collection, which by the way, this app has not really changed on the latest version of Windows 10. It looks very similar. And then we have the Get Office app, which I find quite interesting, and then we have the People app, which I didn't even know existed on this version of Windows 10. I guess I forgot about it. Then we have the Clock app, as you can see here, and then after that we have Skype, which it wanted us to download it, which I'm not, and then more apps requiring an internet connection, and then we have the Sports app, which looks very similar to all those other apps I showed previously. You guys will see there's a common trend, and honestly, I think it's pretty cool. And you can see we even have the Maps app, which I don't know who would use Maps on their computer, but I mean, I guess it's there, it's an option, so yeah, we have that. And in this version, we have the good old classic sticky notes, which is even in Windows 7 and 8, which is pretty cool. Now for the newer version of Windows 10, we have more apps, such as 3D Viewer right here, which was not in RTM. And then we have the Clock app, and I just start going through all of the list of apps, as you guys can see on the list, in order, so that way I didn't forget any of them, because I know on RTM I probably didn't show them all. You can see Groove Music looks a bit different on the newer version of Windows 10, well, the latest version of Windows 10, that is. But some of these apps look similar and some of them don't. Like, I've noticed that the apps seem maybe a bit more inconsistent on newer builds. I mean, some of them have the same structure, but not all of them. So you'll see though here, the Solitaire collection looks exactly the same. That's like one of the apps that did not change in the slightest. Like, I don't even notice a difference. I'm sure there might be, but I don't know. And there, try to open Xbox, which didn't work. And obviously Microsoft Store says we don't have a connection because I didn't connect it in this video, and I'm sure it's an older version. But here, Mixed Reality. This is interesting. This was actually added in version 1803. I think it got discontinued, but the app was still somehow on my VM, so I guess it was there still. Anyways, as you'll see here, the Office app is more lame, as it just tells you to connect to the internet, and of course OneDrive, which I don't think I opened on RTM. And just more apps. Now, Paint 3D, I thought got discontinued as well. Maybe it didn't, or I'm thinking of something else, but it was still on my VM. And you guys will see the People app also exists here too, which obviously looks definitely different compared to initial release. And next we have the Photos app, and I just continue showing these apps essentially, which the next app is quite interesting. Well, maybe not really that interesting, but it's Skype, which actually got discontinued back in May. So, rip Skype, you'll be missed. Which Skype got replaced by Microsoft Teams, which is not a shock as Microsoft owns both of them and they don't need to, but you can see it wanted to sign in, which probably wouldn't work anyway. Then we have Snip and Sketch, which was pretty cool. It's basically the new snipping tool, but it's just built in as an app. And then we have the Sticky Notes, which this is the more modern version that actually supports signing in a Microsoft account and saving your notes. It also allowed for, additional customization, such as adding images. Anyways, now we open the Tips app, which obviously requires internet, and then we open the voice recorder, which I accidentally denied permission to the microphone. Whoops, don't do that. Anyways, then we have the Weather app, which of course needed internet, and then the Xbox app, which just kept crashing once again, just like on RTM. But the game bar worked, and then obviously the Phone app required an update, and then all the other Office shortcuts in there just try to go to a browser, and then all the things that wanted to download kept opening the Tips app. Now let's move on to Windows Defender, which on RTM uses the old Windows 8.1 Defender with very old virus definitions, and you guys will see here that it's very basic. There isn't a lot to it. There's some things and settings for it, but not a lot, honestly. And you guys will see once we head over to our newest VM and we open Windows Defender, it's now called Windows Security, and it's a whole-on UWP app, and you can see it's got a lot of stuff in there. I didn't go in detail on everything, but honestly, it's definitely a massive change. So now we move on to the settings apps, which on RTM, it's very basic. There really isn't a whole lot to it. And you can see on the About screen, it doesn't even list the dot number update that it's on, which that was added in version 15.11, thank goodness. But also, as you guys will see here in personalization, you can't even enable colored title bars. They're forever going to be white and there's no way to add color to them. However, they did fix that in version 15.11, as I guess too many people wanted it back. You can see we have the old themes menu, which on modern versions got replaced. But overall, RTM did have a very simple settings app. I'll say it did work. As you can see on the bottom of the taskbar, it even has that outline around the settings app, which also got removed in version 15.11. I feel like that version did polish up a lot of the issues that RTM had and fixed a lot of those complaints. But I mean, the RTM settings app worked. Yeah, it was basic, but it worked. At least the settings app on RTM could be in a window, unlike on Windows 8.1 that had it full screen. But anyways, you guys will see I'm going through some of the wallpapers, and then we move on to the newest version of Windows 10, which this settings app had quite a bit as they moved things from control panel. Now, you guys will see once we actually get to the about that it actually does list the dot number update, which this VM is definitely out of date, but as I said, I never connected this VM to the internet, nor did I connect the RTM VM. So, as you guys will see here, there's a lot of settings and it took me quite a bit to go through. But the good thing is we have colored title bars and they look great, which obviously that's been around for most of 10, only RTM didn't have them. And we have all the app stuff all in its list right here. But honestly, I'm sure there's definitely quite a bit of new features. I will say a couple of them. Some of the newer features of Windows 10 that I really like is one, dark mode, which I didn't have enabled yet on this VM because I just kept everything default, but it was much easier on my eyes. They added that in version 16.07. Another good feature is nightlight, which I tend to use if I have a headache and I want to get rid of all the blue light in the screen, which is very helpful as well as clipboard history, which is very useful if I have multiple things in my clipboard and I keep copying things. So overall, Windows 10 has added quite a bit of features. I'm sure there's more I forgot about, but those are the few features that I personally think are very useful, and you guys should be using them, because honestly, I think they're great. So anyways, the settings apps are quite different between the two builds, but before we move on, let's show one more thing that I forgot to show, which is more of the personalization settings, because there's a feature you guys might not have saw, which is that taskbar, as you saw, got lighter, because they added the light theme taskbar in version 1903, which I actually liked. And you can see also that tent wallpaper is new. I don't know when that was added, but that was not an RTM, or at least I didn't see it when I was going through the theme. So you guys will see, I'm just messing with the themes at the moment. The flowers theme did exist on RTM, however, I forgot to show it. It probably has the same wallpapers, there might be new ones, I'm not entirely sure, but I actually really do like the flowers theme. I think it looks cool. And you can see like the light and dark themes, you could see the light theme was bugging a bit there. But the taskbar, it looks really good depending on the theme. And honestly, I think it looks good with the flower theme. So there's that, and the Dark Explorer. Now the next thing I'm going to be showing is the control panel, which has drastically changed between the two because on RTM there was a lot more in the control panel, but as you know on the newer versions they try to port everything to settings and then there's less things. So here I'm just going through the main menus. I'm not going through the sub menus because it would take a lot longer to do that, and this video is already fairly long. But you'll see on RTM there's quite a bit of settings there still, and most things can still be accessed in control panel. However, if we go to our Windows 10 22H2 VM and we open control panel, you will notice there's definitely less options there compared to RTM. So again, I'm just going to go through it. If you want to go back and compare screens, you're more than welcome to. But I will say they definitely ported a lot to settings, and I honestly don't even find myself going in control panel often anymore because the settings app practically has everything you need. So it's not something we need to go to often anymore. However, back to RTM as we're going to look at the user interface a bit more because I want to show both of them before ending off this video. So first we show the search at the bottom and the things that it has to offer. I even search a couple things just to show how it works and how it looks. So anyways, after that we look at the virtual desktops again, where you can make different desktops, which this feature is very useful. It's definitely changed a little bit compared to both, as on the newer version it's at the top, but on RTM it's at the bottom. Then we go through the menus at the bottom, like the network, the power, the action center, and the calendar, and etc., which I'd say it looks pretty nice. And then we have the system tray with the different icon for removing hardware that changed in 15.11. Then we have the taskbar settings, which is in a completely different spot. It's like Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. And then we take a look at File Explorer once again. And then I'm going to open up the system properties so you guys can see what that looks like on RTM. And then as you can see, when I right click the start button, the context menu is different. And I open WinVer to see Windows 10 build 10240. Looking at the user interface of Windows 10 version 22H2 looks a lot more modern compared to version 15.07. You can see we first look at the search once again, and I even search a couple things just to show what it looks like, and it's a lot larger and looks a lot nicer. I even go through some of the settings, which actually opens the settings app because they put things in there too. So the next thing we look at is the task view, which has timeline, which I thought that got discontinued, but it was added in version 18.03. And then I take a look at the virtual desktops, which are at the top of the screen now. You can rename them and all kinds of stuff, which I don't think you could rename them on RTM. After that, I take a look at news and interests, which doesn't load because there's no internet connection, and then I hide the Meet Now icon because it's useless. Then I start going through some of the other things on the taskbar, such as the Action Center, which honestly looks a whole lot better. And you guys will see the hardware remove icon has changed, and it's obviously newer and more modern. And you guys will see that there is the calendar, which looks definitely different. There's even like an agenda menu there. The right-click menu has a more modern design, and going to taskbar settings actually opens the settings app. So now we open File Explorer once again, just to show that, and right-clicking computer and going to properties opens the About and Settings. However, if I right-click and go to properties anywhere in the File Explorer window, we actually get the official system properties. So then after that, I open up WinVer to show that it is version 22H2. I know it's not the most up-to-date, but there we have it. Before ending off this video, I do want to connect both to the internet just to show what it's like. Now, I didn't connect it before because I wanted everything to stay the same. However, now I decided to connect it just to briefly show you guys. So the Microsoft Store on RTM is dead. It just does this. The server stumbled. We all have bad days is what it says. And the Xbox app still crashes. Obviously, I didn't know if the weather app worked. I didn't give it a location or anything, but it might have worked. I don't know. But when I open the news app, you will see something quite interesting, which the news app just says an error occurred, try refreshing, and then says service is currently not available. I open the money app, same thing. So clearly the services for these were shut down and they're no longer going to function. So then I just end up shutting down the virtual machine because I'm done with RTM for this video. And now we go to 22H2. Anyways, now we're going to connect version 22H2 to the internet. I wanted to see if those apps would maybe load in the start menu so we could see what those were. However, you guys will see what happens. So I'm connected and you guys can see nothing's loading so far. And when I try to open them, they still just open the Tips app like before, which the Tips app loads, but the apps are just still not there. I guess they were apps that it was supposed to download. Maybe it just hasn't done it yet. It might not have been long enough. But you can see our news and interests is actually loading, which it starts trying to load the weather. It was glitching a bit, but I did get it to work in the end. And you guys will see that's fully functional, so that's good. Anywho, at that point, I decided to try to open an app that was not working before, which is the Xbox app, which it still crashes. So maybe it just needs an update, I guess. Which I open the Microsoft Store and it wants to update. So I let the Microsoft Store update, and as you guys can see, it updates and it's the newer looking Windows 11 store. I'm sure if I updated all the apps, the Xbox app would work. However, I just decided to call it there because I think I've showed enough for this video. So anyways, let's shut this VM down because we're done. Well guys, that will do it for this video of comparing Windows 10 version 15.07 to Windows 10 version 22H2. It's quite the difference and there is a lot of stuff. Definitely didn't cover everything, however, it's a lot of material and this is a pretty long video as it is. But either way, it's crazy how Windows 10 is literally 10 years old. I just find it insane, which I do have a video planned for Windows 10 EOL, which I'll be more showing the memories of Windows 10 because I feel like that'd be more appropriate to show around EOL. So I thought for this one just to show differences, and then next time for EOL, I'll show like memories and stuff. So Anyways, feel free to comment. What was your guys' favorite Windows 10 feature? You know, feel free to comment, say stuff, whatever you guys want to do. But that will conclude this video. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Also thanks to my channel members, which are Samir Yoshizawa, The Full Moon, Christian1739, Overgreen, Strawtech8, Zygvlogs, DJ1i28, Dencorn, Cyclone, Star, Aqua, Ritu, Mycrea, Chris Garrett, Zax Tech Plays, Caden, along with everyone else here on this list. I really appreciate the support and it really means a lot to me. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this great video and more to come soon, and bye-bye for now.